Need to start making some progress on the V10 build. So I got a couple parts in. Got my SunPro O2 sensor gauge, and I went back to Prosport, same company I went with for my hopper temperature gauge on my little Shivota that's sitting outside. And I really like their gauges. They look good and they're available in the right colors. The Dodge gauge cluster lights factory are green, so the Evo series of gauges from Prosport are available in a white green. So that's the ones that I ordered. So I have one gauge that's going to be for my hopper temperature, and this one is a they advertise it as a water temperature sensor, while my hopper never gets, you know, over, I think the highest temperature I've ever seen was 400 degrees when I completely ran out of wood. But since putting this gauge on and learning how to drive the truck better, I think the highest I've seen it was like 260. So this maxes out, I think, 300. This is going to do fine for my hopper temperature. This one here is a EGT, exhaust gas temperature, and I haven't decided yet if I'm going to put this in the rails or if I'm going to put this in the crossover. But either way, this is good for, well, I don't remember. I think it was like 3,000 degrees or something like that. So that's the gauge I'm going to be running for my gas temperature. And this guy here from Glowshift, I got a gauge pod. And this will go on the B-pillar in the truck. I'll mount all three of these gauges in it. Nice and tidy, look real clean, still be easily seen, and that's the way I decided to go for putting everything in. So I'm going to start going through the wiring on these, figure out what powers and grounds I can all get tied together in a harness that I can put in the back of this, just to keep it nice and tidy. And because this is black, instead of running out and getting some trim clad paint and painting it gray to match the rest of the interior, now that I'm done moving, I'm ready to start tearing apart my green truck to put the white truck together. And I've decided I'm going to keep the black trim pieces out of my green truck, swap into the white one. So instead of having to go get paint and paint this to make it match, it's already black. It's going to match all the interior pieces that I put in. So yeah, I'm going to get to work on that. So for running this gauge pod, if anybody is going to be doing a V10 or a V8 Dodge, and you want to run this Glowshift pod, these little extensions for the screws have to go on. There's that. Got our wire harness here. And I'm just going to go through and straighten the wires out just a little bit. Makes them easier to lay in place. I'm going to go ahead and plug the harness in. I'm going to take their adjusting key, and this is my personal preference. I'm going to turn the brightness all the way up, which is to the right. And I'm going to go through and feed the harness through the hole. And before the gauge goes in all the way, I just get it started just a little bit. The bracket that they send with these things kind of just barely fits in here. It's a very tight fit. Roll the gauge around, get it close to where it's going to lay out flat. I mean, as close as you can, because you know you're not in the truck looking at it. But when it's in this orientation is where the bracket will barely set in there. Then slide the gauge through. And it's a bit of a bear to get it to line up on those studs. There we go. You can see they're just barely poking through the mount. Then you can put your nuts and washers on. Now your adjustment for your brightness is already done. You don't have to get back in here because that adjuster is way down in that corner. There's no way you can get the adjusting tool in place once the gauge is mounted in there. It's also kind of tight to get fat fingers in there and tighten these down. I've only got them finger tight for the moment. I'll tighten them up before final installation. There you can see, I'm going to turn my light on so you can see better. That bracket sits tight into the plastic on both sides. So the gauge does not have a lot of adjustment, just a few degrees, which is good because it kind of automatically lines the gauges up to where they need to be. See, this one's just a little bit crooked. About like so. I'm going to go through and get the AFR gauge in and start running the wiring harness. Try and make it look nice. Now I know a lot of people get really easily intimidated by wiring, and this probably looks like a spaghetti string mess of crap that most small-time mechanics or hobby guys don't want to deal with. And don't get me wrong, I still get intimidated by wiring. But the way I think of everything is how far can you simplifize it down before you install it. So I've got 3 different gauges going to 3 different sensors doing 3 different things. How can I make this as simple as possible? Well, every single one of the gauges needs power, needs a ground, needs accessory power, and needs a sensor. So we're going to combine what we can to simplify it and separate out what we can't. Now the AFR, the gas temperature, and hopper temperature all need 2 key-on accessory powers, except the AFR, it only needs 1. So all of these wires will be running to a key-on power. So this can be its own harness laying in here. All 3 gauges need a ground. So they're all 3 right here in their own little harness. Now, with the Evo series, these are available in white green. You can either set them up to be all white all the time, all green all the time, or white during the day, and when you turn the headlight switch on, they turn green. I set my other truck up green full time. This one I'm going to set up white daytime, green with the headlights on. So the way that you do that is this wire, the orange for both of the Prosport gauges, goes to the headlight wires. So when you turn the headlights on, it will automatically switch them from white over to green. And the AFR also has a wire that is activated for the backlight by the headlight switch. So those wires are all right here in their own nice little harness. And then the sensors themselves will be in a separated harness. For the AFR, our green wire will be going to the O2 sensor. For our gas temperature, we have 2 wires here that will be going to the thermocouple. And for the hopper temperature, we have 1 wire that will be going to its sensor, and then its sensor has its own ground. So we have our sensor wires here, our 12 volt key on power here, ground here, headlight switch here. Now they're all separated. I'm going to go through and tie them together inside of this in a nice separated harness for each one, so that when it goes in the truck, I have 1 connection to make, 1 connection to make, 1 connection to make, and then the rest out to our sensors, which, you know, you follow your directions easy as pie. So we're going to take this mess of spaghetti and we're going to turn it down to 3 critical connections plus the sensors. Simplifying it that way makes my brain wrap around it much easier before it goes in the truck and you're sitting there staring at wiring and all these different schematics and you're trying to figure out what goes to what. Simplify it down as much as you can before you hook it up. It's just, it works for me really well. Now we're getting somewhere. Okay, so we've now taken 11 separated wires, turned it down into 3 connections. Key on power, ground, headlight switch. So each one of the harnesses for each gauge is separated into what it needs and then combined into another central harness that will only take up one connection point. Now, you'll notice I have tape right here. This is so that I could keep all the wires the same length up to this point. Now you could wrap this in loom all the way down or just electrical tape. It's going to be an interior, it's not super critical. But the thing is, you don't really want it this close up to the gauges, because if for whatever reason you need to pull the pillar pod off and pull an individual gauge out, you only have 3 inches of wire to be able to pull that gauge out, try to disconnect the harness. So what I'm going to do, I am going to centralize these, but I'm going to do it somewhere down in here. That way I have lots of room to get the pod in and out, and if I have to take the pod off of the A-pillar and service a gauge for whatever reason, if one goes out, if a light burns out, whatever the case may be, all of this will be laying down here. Pull the gauge pod off. This is all free slack, and every gauge can pop out and we'll have 8 inches of wire exposed. Unplug the gauge, do whatever I need to do. The pigtail will be hanging out the front. Easy to plug it back in, throw the assembly back in. Like I said, you could leave it this way, but you just have to bear in mind, if you ever had to service a gauge, it's going to be a bit of a turd because you're not going to have any length of wire to pull through and get to everything. 3 wrecking yards later, I was finally able to find one of these A-pillar column covers that didn't have the tabs snapped off. So, popped a 1/2 inch hole, pulled all of my wires through. There's still going to be plenty of slack I can pull back and forth. I've already extended all of my sensor wires, color coded to the same as the stock stuff, so I can't screw it up, which means that I can completely install this and do all of my wire hookups without having to look at it again. And this is a overcover pillar pod, so you just kind of, and they don't fit great, but you just cover it up as the best as you can from the front to the back. And they tell you to use a 7/32 drill bit and drill the corners out. And you do have to be very gentle drilling this stuff. It's very brittle. Especially if it's been, in a sun-baked interior since 1995. These little pops go in place. Apparently they're a pretty tight fit, which isn't a bad thing. I'll actually use a set of pliers to set that. Get this corner set. There's that one. Get this one to go all the way. Ooh, I'm gonna grab a pair of pliers real quick. Ta-da! 5 minutes of fiddling later. I'll do the bottom side here. Just line it up the best we can. Okay, there we go. And it doesn't fit worth a crap. Typical of a $40 Amazon part. And because it's only held in the corners, you can see there's a gap. If I were to go back and do this again, I would not use these plastic rivets. They're janky as could be. I would probably just use either some Velcro or some double stick tape. Anyways, now it's ready to go in the truck. We'll get it hooked up. We've got a hole in the dash right here where we're going to pass our wiring down through. This is where we're going to hook up power. So I got my sensor wires. There's our sensor wires through. Now we're going to pull our power wires, which I'm going to braid together really quickly, just to make it easier. Finally got those fish through there. Kind of a tight fit in this little spot. Make sure that we don't pinch any of our wiring as it goes into place. There we go. Yeah. Nice and easily viewable if you're staring out the windshield. quick glance. Hopper temperature, gas temperature, airflow meter. I'm gonna get some wires. Now I'm gonna get some wires temporarily hooked up so I can make them light up and make it look like I'm finished, because I'm not ready to do the wiring. Now, like I said, I'm not ready to do the wiring yet because I haven't built the gasifier. I don't have any of the sensors ready to hook up. But let's just say for show and tell, all of our lights turn on, all of our gauges turn on. Now I'm going to connect the white wire, which will be ended up hooking up into the headlight switch, and they should turn green. Cool. We're all ready to roll. Time for more work to get going on with the truck. Got some extra pieces that I picked up today that heavy fabrication can start now. Thanks for watching, guys.